Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the channel today. Today's video is going to be the post-draft power rankings. A couple weeks ago, I posted my initial power rankings video that was before the draft. Now we have kind of an idea of what the teams addressed in the draft, what players they got, how much better they got, etc. So now I'm going to be kind of doing my post-draft power rankings, talking about where the teams moved and everything. But before we get into the rankings, a couple of things. Um, Not only will I be explaining why each team is in the position they're at and why they got better or worse, but I will also be referencing my last list and saying how many spots this certain team moved up or down. And B, just want to say another big thank you for all the support that you guys have been showing the channel lately. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And I am happy that you guys seem to be enjoying the video. So hopefully another good video for you guys today. Let's start with the bottom. You always got to start with the bad news and then get to the better news. Same team for 32. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, to me, they're one of the least talented. They're one of the least talented teams in the NFL, and I don't think that they got substantially better enough in the draft to improve their position too much. With their first round pick, they took Kalijah Kancey, a defensive tackle, which he's a good player. But when you're a team that is struggling as bad as the Buccaneers, I don't think a defensive tackle is going to do you too much good early on in his career. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still my worst team in the NFL. Coming in at number 31, the second worst team in the NFL I have is the Tennessee Titans, moving down 2 spots in my mock draft. Now, the reason for this was because I think the Titans are, again, a team that they don't have an answer at quarterback yet. Although with Will Levis, they may have an answer now, but who knows? He was a second rounder, so they didn't invest enough capital into him to where he's definitely going to be the starter. It's also now a crowded quarterback room with Ryan Tannehill there. Who knows what's going to happen to Malik Willis? Kind of a mess. But again, I don't think that they got significantly better. I think, again, when you're a team like the Titans that's so devoid of talent and you take a guard early in the draft, that was a really big miss, in my opinion. I think Peter Skoronski's a fine player, but I just don't. And he might play tackle, whatever. But I just think the Titans, a lot of teams got better in this draft, and I don't think the Titans were one of them. At number 30, I have the Arizona Cardinals moving up 1 spot. I really like the Paris Johnson pick, and I think, not that this applies for this ranking necessarily, but I like the fact that they have Houston's first-round pick next year in the draft to play around with and help to retool their rebuild. But, I still don't like their coach. Kyler's still going to miss pretty much half the year. So they're a team that I think is one of the bottom feeders, which I think is okay for where they're at in their rebuild. But they did move up 1 spot because I do really like Paris Johnson getting that in the draft. Number 29, I have the Rams. The Rams are moving down 1 spot in my ranking, and this really isn't a substantial move necessarily. The Rams actually made more draft picks in this draft than any other team. However, none of those were in the first couple of rounds, so none of the real premium players. But they added some depth. They added some, hopefully quality players in the draft. And I just don't think that they improved upon themselves enough to where in 2023 they will be a much better team. I still think Stafford and Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp have all seen better days. And I wonder if the Rams are close to blowing it up soon. Who knows? I am not going to rank them any higher on my power rankings for now. Next, I have a 28, the Raiders. I am not a Raiders fan at all, unfortunately. They're moving down 1 spot in my power rankings. I did like the Tyree Wilson pick. I will say I did like Tyree Wilson. But again, I just think, especially with a lot of teams getting better, I don't think the Raiders necessarily got too much better. Again, I like Tyree Wilson, but I thought Christian Gonzalez would have filled a much bigger need at that point in the draft. It's whatever, but I just don't think the Raiders are close to the same level of competency as a lot of these other teams, especially the teams that got better in the draft. They did not. The Saints at number 27, I have them moving up 3 spots. I actually liked a little bit of what the Saints did in the draft. I'm not going to lie. Brian Brisee was one of my most underrated players in the first round. Getting him to euthanize, if that's a word, their defensive line, make it stronger. I think Jake Haener is also a really underrated pick in this draft. He could be a really good quarterback years down the line. And then I also like A.T. Perry. I think he's another really underrated player. So, the Saints, part of this ranking, part of this upward movement, hey, what's all that movement? Part of this upward movement is just because I think I ranked them a little too low last time, but I did like some of the additions they made in the draft. A.T. Perry, Jake Hayner, and of course, Brian Brisset in the first round. That moves on to number 26, the Washington Commanders. Have them moving down 3 spots. I really didn't like what they did in the first round. I think Emmanuel Forbes is fine, but I think he's a really small corner, especially with Christian Gonzalez still on the board. I think it was the right position, wrong player. Again, don't really understand the Emmanuel Forbes pick for them, and I just don't think that they got significantly better. They didn't make any improvements. That's the whole point of the draft. You're supposed to retool your team and restock. I just don't think Washington made any big improvements to their team. So for that, they're going to move down 3 spots. Number 25, I have the Atlanta Falcons moving down 1 spot in my power rankings. Now you might be saying, well, the Falcons, they made some big good moves, and I would say that they did, but I still have a problem with Bijan Robinson going number 8 overall to the Falcons. I think that they had other positions of need, other positions to address, and I think that from a team building standpoint, it's still a bad move. Still don't like Desmond Ridder at quarterback, and I'm still really not convinced at Arthur Smith for the coach. So for those reasons, if I don't like your coach and I don't like your quarterback, then you're probably not going to be very high on my power rankings, unfortunately. Next, let's go to number 24, a team that did improve. They proved that they were very ballsy in the top part of the draft. That's the Houston Texans, moving up 2 spots into my 24 slot. C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson are going to be instant impact players for this team. Very, very excited to see what those guys do down the line. I think they maybe gave up a little too much of their future, but again, it makes the Texans better sooner, which you can't really argue with, I guess. I also like Tank Dell. I think that that's going to be a really solid weapon for C.J. Stroud. And the Texans, they're not going to be a playoff team this year. They're not going to be a playoff team. But the goal for the Texans is to build a really good foundation of young players to have continued success for years to come. And I think that they took a big step in that during the draft. So I have to reward them with 2 upward movements in my power rankings. Next, I have number 22. That's the Denver Broncos, falling 5 spots. Now, falling 5 spots seems a bit dramatic, but I will say part of that is because a lot of these teams were just so close to begin with. So a team like the Broncos, who really didn't have a lot of draft picks, their first pick was Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma, and they didn't have draft picks to begin with. And then they made another trade with Seattle to trade up and get Riley Moss, giving up more of their draft capital. So it's just crazy. They just need to stop trading with Seattle, obviously. But a few decent additions, but I don't really think that they improve too much. I'm not going to get too excited about Riley Moss and Marvin Mims. So I'm going to move them down 5 spots, which isn't as dramatic as it seems, but, still not great. Number 22, I have Green Bay Packers moving down 4 spots in this draft. Listen, say what you want. I really didn't like their draft. I did not like Lucas Van Ness there at 14. I thought he was, I just don't like him. I don't think that he's going to be a premier player in the NFL. I didn't like the double tight end strategy that they employed. I thought one of them would have been just fine, and I definitely did not like the Sean Clifford pick in the 5th round. Outside of that, obviously being a quarterback, I think that there were quarterbacks still left with a lot more upside. So the pick really confused me, especially when you're trying to instill confidence into Jordan Love in his first year in Green Bay. Really didn't understand. So I really didn't like their draft. And, they're a team that's kind of on the decline, especially with Aaron Rodgers leaving. When I first made this power rankings video, Aaron Rodgers was still a Packer. And while I was pretty sure that he was going to be a Jet, it wasn't confirmed yet. So I kind of held out a little bit of hope. But now that Aaron Rodgers is gone, I didn't think they did well in the draft. I'm going to move them down 4 spots to number 22. At 21, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Contrary to what I just said about Green Bay, I loved Indy's draft. They got Anthony Richardson. They got Josh Downs. They got a really talented defensive lineman whose name I can't pronounce, but I wanted the Seahawks to draft him. I thought they really killed the draft. They did a really, really nice job. I'm a big If you can't tell, I'm a big Anthony Richardson believer. I think he has the potential to be an MVP caliber player. Right away, maybe not, but I think that he will immediately change games with his athleticism, and then the pocket awareness and pocket presence will come. Really excited to see what the Colts do with new head coach Shane Steichen. I have them up to number 21 in my power rankings. Number 20, I put the Bears down 4 spots from my original power rankings. Now, to be honest, I kind of came back to reality. I think I ranked the Bears a little bit too high. I put them in kind of the top half of teams when they were literally just the worst team in the NFL. So maybe that was a lapse in judgment by me. So their -4 ranking is not necessarily indicative of what they did in the draft. It was probably just my prior bias as a partial Bears fan. But I think the Bears did improve in the draft. They definitely got some positions of need. Darnell Wright obviously fills a big hole at offensive tackle. I think Tyreek Stevenson at corner is an underrated need for the Bears. I liked Roshan Johnson. I like Tyler Scott, players with really good upside. So I like the Bears draft. I didn't think they hit it out of the park. I thought Jalen Carter might have been better at 9, but I thought they did a good job of addressing some needs and getting guys like that. But again, a rebuilding team, you got to see what you have in Justin Fields, and this is not the year for the Bears to compete. They're probably a 2024, 2025 team if everything goes right. But what you want to see this year is improvement, and being number 20 would be an improvement for the Bears, which I could definitely see. Number 19, I have the Cleveland Browns moved up 1 spot. Really not, nothing blown. It really wasn't blown away by what they did in the draft, but kind of was rearranging some teams around in this order, and I decided to bump up Cleveland 1. Cedric Tillman, I think, is a nice get. I think he's going to be a good wide receiver. He's kind of overshadowed by Jalen Hyatt when he was at Tennessee, so I kind of like what Cedric Tillman's going to do. I thought their receiver room is a little thin, but number 19 for the Cleveland Browns, not too shabby. Number 18, I actually have the New England Patriots, who are up 5 spots from my last power ranking. Now, this is primarily due to a few reasons. I realized ranking a Bill Belichick team 23rd out of my power rankings, probably not my smartest idea I've ever had. Also, I love the pick of Christian Gonzalez. I think he is going to be a awesome defensive player in Bill Belichick's scheme, and I'm surprised that he fell all the way to number 17. So, I really liked what they did in the draft, and I think that probably ranked them a little bit too low. So that's why they're up 5 spots to number 18. Again, I think that they're right where they should be, where they're kind of that fringe, maybe not good enough maybe to be a playoff team, not bad enough to have a top 10 pick kind of range is where I see the Patriots. I don't think they have a lot of talent, which is why they're number 18. But again, they're going to be well coached. They're going to play good defense. They're going to have good special teams. If Bill O'Brien can make that offense a little bit better, they're not going to be an easy team to beat. Again, I don't think that they're talented enough to be a legit playoff team, but they're not, a pushover by any means. Number 17, I have Carolina Panthers up 2 spots from my last draft. Up 2 spots for a pretty good reason. Bryce Young, I think, is going to be awesome in Carolina. I also like the pick of Jonathan Mingo to get a good wide receiver for Bryce Young to pair with DJ Chark and Adam Thielen. I just like what the Panthers have. I think they have really nice pieces on defense. J.C. Horn, Brian Burns. I think Frank Reich is going to come in. I think Frank Reich is a dark horse Coach of the Year candidate, if we're being real. And I like what they're building. Again, I don't think that they're a Super Bowl team this year. Bryce is going to have to feel it out in his rookie year, and there's going to be some bumps and there's going to be some curves. They'll probably win. They'll probably lose, a few games that they could win, and they might surprise us and win a few games that we think they're going to lose. But overall, I think that they are probably still the best team in the South in that division, and I have them being a pretty much average team in the NFL this year. At number 16, I have the Steelers moving down 1 spot, but again, that's not based on what they did in the draft. I actually really, really like the pick of Broderick Jones. I actually called that by name in my last Power Rankings video. I said, they'd probably go for Broderick Jones when I was looking back on it, and I was right. They went with Broderick Jones. They had to trade up to get him, but, who cares? I think the Steelers, again, are just a really kind of average team. I love Mike Tomlin. I'm not yet sold on, Kenny Pickett, so that's kind of why we're in that middle ground where I like the coach, not sure I like the quarterback. But I think George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris are nice weapons. You really beefed up the big boys up front for the offense. Like I said, with Broderick Jones and from Darnell Washington. So they got the Georgia boys out there blocking. Like that move. I thought that was what they needed. And obviously, I think Joey Porter was a really good value pick in the top of the second round. Like what they did in the draft. I just think that they're not super talented yet. They're not like one of these upper echelon teams with boatloads of talent. But I still like them. I think they'll go around 500, just like Mike Tomlin pretty much goes every year. At number 15, I have the New York Giants. I've said it in the last video. I'm just not a Giants believer. I'm not a Danny Dimes truther, as you guys say on Twitter. I have them 2 spots lower in this power rankings. It's just looking at their schedule. They have a pretty tough schedule this year, and again, the more I think about it, the more I'm not a believer in Danny Dimes, unfortunately. Unfortunately. Speaking of New York, though, at number 14, I have the Jets, who are jumping way up 7 spots in this power rankings. Again, part of that is just because they now officially are in possession of Aaron Rodgers. That was a big get. I didn't love Will McDonald in the draft, but I think Aaron Rodgers combined with some of their other draft picks. I know they got the center. I believe it was Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin. Was it Joe Tippmann or Lucas? They got a center. They got a center. So I think that was also a big position of need. They improved a good amount. Again, this area is kind of crowded. So when you have such a big move like getting Aaron Rodgers, it's going to bump you up a decent amount. Plus 7 in my power rankings. I'll still have the Jets at 14. Excuse me. The Vikings I'll have at number 13. This is where we start getting into the kind of legit teams, right? Moving down 1 spot for my power rankings. You know, I think that is really just because I think a lot of these teams above them improved tremendously. I think Minnesota. I like the Jordan Addison pick. I do. Some of their picks wasn't a huge fan of, but it's whatever. The Vikings, I still think are a sus team. Is probably the best way I can describe them. They went 11-0 last year in one-score games. Typically, teams go about 50-50 in those games. If you're a good team, you might win 60-70%. Nobody's winning 11 straight games in that kind of parameter. So the Vikings, to say they got lucky would be an understatement. They're definitely going to fall back down to earth this year. But I still think that Kirk Cousins is good. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is great. Everything like that. But there's also been reports lately that Dalvin Cook may no longer be a Viking. So do with that information what you will. But number 13 for the Vikings. At number 12, I have the Los Angeles Chargers moving down 3 spots. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think some teams above them improved a little bit more. Hence, them kind of swapping places a little bit. Still love Justin Herbert. I'm not completely sold on Brandon Staley. He's kind of fucked them up in the past, but Justin Herbert's great. Getting Quentin Johnson was not the move I expected them to make, but I think it will make their receiver core that much more dangerous. And they last year for stretches looked like a Super Bowl team. They couldn't really put it together for long enough to go far, but if you took like the Chargers at their peak, I think they can go toe-to-toe with a lot of the best teams in the NFL. So that's what I'll say about the Chargers, and we'll just have to see if they can put it together. At number 11, I have the Dallas Cowboys, also moving down 3 spots. Did not like their first-round pick with Mozzie Smith. People can disagree with me, but I thought they should have gone with like Michael Mayer or something like that. They have some holes on the offense now, and I don't think Dak is good enough to overcome all of those holes. But, they're still a solid team. They still got, Tony Pollard. Hopefully he comes off his injury looking like he did last year. They still got CeeDee Lamb, who's great. The defense is going to be really, really good. Mozzie Smith is going to make that defense better, for whatever that's worth. And they're a top 12, 13-ish team. Let's talk about number 10. My 10 best teams in the league. Number 10, that's the Baltimore Ravens, moving up 4 spots in the draft. Really like the Zay Flowers pick. I think getting Lamar wide receiver and getting him plenty of it is a fantastic strategy. The more I think about it, the more I love the hiring of Todd Monken. I think he's going to bring that Georgia offense, who utilize their tight ends so well, to Baltimore, to utilize guys like Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Obviously, Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham, and Rashad Bateman now in the mix. The Ravens have a really, really good offense. Lamar's been inked up for 5 more years. I like it. I didn't want him to play with a lot of turmoil this year. I like it. I have them as a top 10 team. Speaking of top 10 teams, I have my Seattle Seahawks as team number 9 in this draft, moving them up 2 spots in my power rankings. Pretty simply, actually, gifted a top 5 pick, took the best corner in the draft, in my opinion. Then at pick 20, took the best receiver in the draft. They also added a quality running back in the second round, couple edge guys, couple interior offensive and defensive guys. Filled some needs, got some really high impact players. I really love what Seattle did in the draft, and I think that they did just well enough to vault them into a top 10 team, definitely. Number 8, I have the Miami Dolphins, who moved down 1 spot just because they didn't really do much in the draft because they didn't have much draft capital. Unfortunately, had to forfeit that first round pick. But I still love Miami. I think if Tua could stay healthy, they're a great team. Love Mike McDaniel. Obviously, their defense, like I mentioned in the last episode, got Jalen Ramsey. Got a lot better. I think Jalen Phillips is going to have a monster year, so book that. Vic Fangio obviously is going to be a great help. So number 8 for the Miami Dolphins. San Francisco 49ers at number 7. Now, you might be saying, wow, that's pretty low. I have them moved down 2 spots from my last power rankings. The reason is like, man, they just didn't have a good draft, in my opinion. They didn't have a lot of picks, and their first 2 picks, they took a backup tight end and a kicker. I didn't like what they did in the draft. I didn't think they got much better. They still don't have an answer at quarterback. But, the rest of their roster is fucking awesome. Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. Don't let people convince you that Kyle Shanahan isn't a good coach. Whoever said that to you is lying to you. Kyle Shanahan's a great coach. But again, just still a question mark at quarterback. At number 6, I had the Detroit Lions moving up 4 spots for my last ranking. Pretty simply, they added a lot of dudes in the draft. Regardless of what you felt about the value where they got guys, these guys are going to be instant impact players. Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Sam Laporta. Those are all going to be really good players in the draft, and I think they did a lot. They did a lot to improve their team, which is something that you always want to see with your team in the draft. Now, getting into my top 5. Number 5 team is the Jacksonville Jaguars, moving up a spot from last time. Not much to say. I thought the Jaguars' Anton Harrison pick was really good. Added protection for Trevor Lawrence. You have another year of Trevor and Doug Peterson, who really got heated up at the end of last season. I love the marriage between those two. Calvin Ridley now is coming into the mix. And I don't know. I just have very high hopes for the Jaguars this year. Number 4 is the Bills, staying the same. They did add Dalton Kincaid. I said in my last video they should add a secondary receiving option. I was thinking more wide receiver, but they added a tight end who acts as a wide receiver, which is pretty much just as good. I think the Bills are pretty good top to bottom. I do worry about them losing Leslie Frazier, however. Josh Allen is still great. Stephon Diggs is still great. That defense is still going to be really good. I like Sean McDermott. Not too worried about the Buffalo Bills. At number 3, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it was kind of hard for me to put the Chiefs at not 2, but I didn't love their draft, to be honest. I didn't love it. Felix Uzama in the first round was a bit of a reach, in my opinion. But, again, they're the fucking Chiefs. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be one of the top 2-3 teams when this year's ending. I have them ranked just a spot lower, but, I mean, you could tell me they're the second best team. You could tell me they're the best team, and I really wouldn't put up an argument. But my top 2, I have the Bengals at number 2, up a spot from last time. I like the Myles Murphy pick. I think it's going to make their pass rush even better, which I think is they just need a little bit more. They need a little bit more pass rush, and I think Myles Murphy can provide that. In an ideal world, you have Trey Hendrickson and Myles Murphy rushing the passer, causing havoc, which is great. And Joe Burrow is awesome. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I like I like Charlie Jones, the receiver that they got as well, probably to replace Tyler Boyd after this year. But my number 1 team, and I would put them higher if I could, Philadelphia Eagles. I had them number 1 before the draft. I thought they had the best draft out of anybody. Not only did they draft, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Keely Ringo, they also traded for DeAndre Swift. So at this point, they're just the Philly Bulldogs. They stayed the same, and they got better. I mean, that's crazy. But that is my kind of post-draft power rankings. I'll be sure to update this list semi-often in the off season, and then obviously weekly during the year. But you guys got to let me know what you think of my list. Let me know if I put a team too high, too low, if I got them just right. Let me know what you guys think down below. Make sure to comment. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. I love you guys, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Peace out.